Good morning. Well, late morning. How y'all doing? I'm doing okay. Not great, if I'm honest. Alright, so yesterday we did a little coding. Not too much, but enough to, make some progress. 2 hours. We disabled some server-side Pygame related code because it's dead on the server side. We don't need to run it. It's just a liability. So I'm basically just going through and adding check, whatever you want to call it, an if clause that checks for an if statement rather that just checks for whether or not they're running on the client side or the server side, and if they're running on the server side or client side, they run the code. If they're not, which means they're running from the server side, then they don't run the code. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We stopped yesterday at line 409 in game, so we're gonna pick up right there. So let's open up game. Alright, so we were doing a search for rect, and unsure of whether or not I should gate off using SSRCS these init get rects. Yeah, so right here where I mean, honestly, we don't even need the font render. Yeah, so and the issue, like the question here was, well, this doesn't happen until after, or rather this happens before we import okay, so P1 and P2 game get created, which runs the initializer at the end of the game module. Okay. Now, from server's perspective, like, how exactly does this occur? So when we run server, it's gonna run all this stuff first. It's gonna import P1, P2, it's gonna import setup, it's gonna import everything from progression. I don't know why we need that. Why do we need that? Alright, we'll come back to that another time. Don't Don't I have a snippet for caution comment? No, I don't. Whatever. I've forgotten. Oh yeah, let me check my extensions real quick. Okay, so they're looks like they're all good. Okay, yeah, so imports, I'm weak on imports. Like, I hate this. I hate dealing with imports, man. I'm not gonna lie. Import logic makes my brain melt. So, it's really not that complicated. They're always overcomplicated. So, it's gonna run through this in this order. Once we get to this line, it's gonna import P1 game and P2 game from game. And I guess when you say from game, like, that's when it runs game. Yeah, it's just an order of events, you know. It's just it's like a nesting doll, you know, a Russian nesting doll, or whatever they call that, where, you know, you got a bigger one, and then inside of it you got another one, and then inside of that one you got another one, and so like it will run player, and player is going to import stuff, and so like player is going to import stuff, and that when that gets imported, it's going to run those files. In a sense, it will run them. Well, it does. Like, if anything's not inside of a, if name is equal to main, then it's gonna run all that stuff when it gets imported. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that that's how it works. So that means whenever we do from player import P1 P2, like, I'm pretty sure it's still, even though we're only importing a couple objects, it's still gonna run the entire file. Means it's gonna run these imports. It's gonna run all this stuff. So, like, short, I want to have logic in game init that only runs in a certain case. So make sure that data is assigned, you know, SS or CS data is assigned before E, right? So basically, to well, you know, another way, I was gonna say, we need to make sure we run the SS or CS before we run the SS or CS before all this stuff, so that whenever any of the imports access that variable, it will already be assigned. But since the variable is basically just a switch, it's either essentially one value or the other, then couldn't we just assign it to SS like as a default value, and then in client we assign it to CS, so basically it's default to server side, which means you know, unless explicitly changed, it will be SS. Now I want to make sure I do this the smart way, so I don't want to cause any bugs. Like, so let's say, do I really need to do this? Well, that's the first question. Am I wasting my time? Like, is this just being dumb? Well, I think that it is worthwhile so I'm quite certain draw window main also is only run on client side. Wait, this is in dir check. Ooh, this is actually. Oh, so this is an issue. This well, no, because remember we said that card group data only gets handled. See, so this stuff, man, I don't know like how you could come into a project like this. Like, I'm the only one who's worked on this project, and I know I'm not a great coder. You know, I would say I'm probably 5 out of 10, but I just don't know, man. Enter into someone else's project. So many magic things that happen, you know, things you have to understand that no one else understands unless project creating the project like I have. I can imagine working on someone else's project like this. It's hard enough working on my own and remembering like all the little nuances. I mean, half of it's probably bad code. I could have just done it in a smarter way, but I think once you get to a certain point, you kind of can't avoid complexity. Like, it's gonna become complex. There's not really a way around that. So simple as possible though. Anyway, we actually don't need to put a if SS or CS here because card group only actually on the server side. Is it? It's not. We went through that because card group data. That only happens. Through the draw animation and then through round reset, I think, and that is both server-side operations, so like we don't need to receive them on the server side because they originate from the server side, if that makes sense. So what we need to do here is I will put only run on client side, and maybe that will help me remember. We don't need a check here. With card instantly as opposed to card movement, which is 10 for guard or 1 movement. There we go. Alright, so anyway, moving on. So this is in the client file. This is not server side. So this also is okay, so where were we? We were at line like 4, okay. 400 409. So why did I look up the draw window main thing again? Why exactly did I look that up? I totally lost my train of thought here, what I was doing initially when I first started. Like why I started looking at draw window main. I know I was looking at this, and then I was like, oh, do I actually need to even do the render? And then I was like looking at draw window main and event handler or something, and I was like, okay, so I was dealing with the imports, and I was saying we need to make sure SS or CS is set properly before the import gets run, because the import is going to cause this initializer to get run because you have to run the initializer to create the two objects, because the two objects get created at the end of the module, which is obviously going to call the initializer. So we wanted to move the since server is main, server is the module we are running the, like, from the terminal, is the main script from which everything else gets imported to, or into which everything gets imported. We would be we would need to have that set beforehand, and that was the concern and the question of whether or not it was set, or do we need to move it, the setting of it, to the top, or could we just set it by default to server side, and then on the client side we just change it to CS. I mean, I really don't like the idea of having it set to server side originally, just because I just don't like that idea. Because if we, like, you know, if it isn't handled perfectly, then we could cause a bug on the client side. So let me just take a look at client real quick, all the way to the top here. So see, we import game and everything from the client side, so like if we're running from the client side and we're importing game, it's going to run those inits, and if SS or CS is set to SS by default and we don't set it to CS prior to this import on the client side, then we're errantly going to assume that it's being run from the server side because that variable hasn't been set yet. So like we should probably make it to where SS or CS is set like right off the bat, meaning before any imports and stuff, because if we're gonna make it to where imports rely upon it, then that means we need to have it assigned before those imports, obviously. So what we'll do is we're going to do that. We're not going to change it to default to SS because that's not smart. We're just going to make this get imported first from our like our imports from our project modules, not like Python modules. So we're putting it at the top now, and then we're gonna go and find SS or CS. Oh, well, I actually should have done that in locally. So we're gonna find that. Okay, so these dir checks can remain. Oh, but that would cause an error. That would be problematic, wouldn't it? Because that would mean if we that would mean that whenever we imported the client file, which we will, because we import client 1 and client 2 and dircheck and client into server, that would mean we would be setting SS or CS to CS, even though it's actually being run from the server side. See what I'm saying? So you got to be real careful here, because importing it to the server, we would set it to SS, but then once we imported client down here, granted that we moved this line up to the top like we're doing in client, and then set the SS or CS to SS, because this would be server side immediately after, which would happen right here. Then that means whenever we import client, it's gonna run the imports in client, and that is going to set it's going to import change attribute list, and then it's going to set SS or CS to CS errantly. So what we have to do here and in server, well, we don't actually import into server, so, or we don't import from server, so I don't think we actually have to do that. Let me see, do we import server? See how complicated this stuff is, man? It's complicated, bro. It is the implications of every little change are huge. Not easy. So I think what we really need to do here is put the if name is equal to main, and then in that case well, you know, and I think we could probably add in code into change attribute list that would check the importing module, and it would like magically assign the correct value. You see what I'm saying? Like we could add in one check into change attribute list, and that check, what it would do is it's going to look at the, what do they call it, the stack, which is your, like, it's the call stack. So the base of your call stack is your main script, and then well it starts from your main script, but it's your main function, and then every subsequent like function entrance is a new layer to the stack, and then you can get the module of that function through the stack, and that will tell you, you know, now that's a little bit complicated. Like it's not as simple as doing this, but it would be automatic. It would be like magic, right? To where, let me just undo these changes real quick. Go back to server, undo these, any changes I did. Well, that can be, alright. I'm just making sure I didn't like fiddle around with this stuff and mess it up. Okay. So what we'll do is I mean, honestly, this is a little bit, it's complicated, but it might be the best solution, because it only requires modifying one location, you know? But I don't. We would still need to import this module first from client and server. But whenever we did that, right here, it says SSCS is equals none. Well, I'm not actually sure this would work. I was gonna say we could then search the stack to see which module originally is importing this file, and based on the name of that file, we would then set SS or CS accordingly. But if we were to do that, wouldn't that mean that whenever we, like, if you import a file once and then you import it again later down the line, doesn't it not actually get imported again? Can't you only import it one time? Meaning that, well, that would be from each local machine though. So like the server, I don't know. Ooh, that's like it's a nuanced question. So like, I'm testing this from my machine, so it's all being tested from the same machine. But if we were to test it, like, from, let's just assume from my machine, okay, but from separate terminal, like separate terminals instances, and then we import it through server on this terminal, but then we import, you know, we have our own individual client terminal and then another individual client terminal, would it work? Meaning that like the multiple import thing, a rule wouldn't apply since we're running it, it's not being imported into the same like workspace. I don't really know the word for this, the proper word I'm looking for. I'm gonna ask Claude here. Claude's really fucking smart. Okay, he's a little smart. He's smarter than me. I don't even know why I'm coding, honestly, because of Claude. Claude's probably gonna be better than me in like a year, so boohoo. And like 10 times faster, maybe 100 times faster. Anywho, let me think of how to ask this. First off, I don't really understand this completely. I want to make sure I understand this. Python, if I import file X into, or if I import file X from file Y, and file X, and import, and then import, how to word this? So if we import file X from file Y, and file X imports file Z, and then I can't type it all, and then I import file Z from file Y, since I imported file Z from file X before I imported file Z directly, doesn't that mean file Z wouldn't get imported the second time since Python only imports files one time per workspace. I'm trying to think of this word per like terminal. I don't know what word I'm looking for. Also, what is a better word for workspace in that scenario? I'm asking my boss. Let me break this down. You're correct. Python only imports any given module once per interpreter session. Interpreter session. There we go. Interpreter session. This is a better term than workspace. Thank you, Claude. When a module is first imported, Python creates a module object and stores it in. When a module is first imported, Python creates a module object and stores it in sys modules, a dictionary that serves as a cache of all loaded modules. Here's a concrete example to illustrate. Okay. Print loading file Z, some variable 42, file X, import Z, print loading file X, and then in file Y we import file X, and then we import file Z. But since X imports Z, this won't trigger file Z to load again. So that's exactly the scenario that I was speaking of. He used the exact same language and everything, which is really cool. Print loading file Y. When you run file YPy, you'll see loading file Z, loading file loading file. So wait, which one do you run? Okay, you run file Y, and then you'll see it'll import file X. File X will first import file Z. So you can see the order of operations gets all out of whack here. And then you have print loading file Z. Because Z is like the end of the import line. Now, after that, you're gonna get import file. So it's sorry, I got a little lost here. Let's start over here. So you got file Y. You can import file X. File X is going to import file Z. File Z is going to print this out. It's going to assign this variable. Now that's done. You're going to get the loading file Z printout. Then it's going to import file Z, but it's already been imported, so we don't get it twice. And then you get print, well, I forgot about the loading file X after the initial loading file Z, because it goes file X imports file Z runs this code, but then it finishes file X, which prints that code, and then you import file Z, but since it's already been imported, it doesn't run it again, and then you get print loading file Y, so you get loading file Z, loading file X, loading file Y. Notice that loading file Z only prints once, even though file Z is imported in both file X and file Y. This is because Python's import mechanism is idempotent. I've never heard that word before. Subsequent imports of the same module just return the existing module object from sys modules. Man, Claude is definitely taking I don't even know why I'm learning. Notice that loading file Z only prints once, even though the file Z is imported in both file X and file Y. This is because Python's import mechanism is idempotent. See what that means exactly. What is idempotent? Because denoting an element of a set which is unchanged in value when multiplied or otherwise operated on by itself. An element of a set which is unchanged in value when multiplied or otherwise operated on by itself. Okay. Idempotent. When performing an operation again gives the same result. Gotcha. Okay. Fair enough. I think I understand. Yeah. Subsequent imports of the same module just return the existing module object from sysmodules. Yeah, so subsequent imports of the same module just return the existing module object. Imports of the same module. Just return the existing module object from sysmodules. This behavior is important for performance, avoiding redundant loading, consistency, ensuring all code references the same instance of a module, preventing circular import issues. Interpreter session or Python interpreter rather than workspace. Module cache, sysmodules for where Python keeps track of loaded modules, and then import mechanism for the system that handles module loading. Okay, cool. So I understand all that. Yeah, so to verify, if I had multiple interpreter instances, one run from server pi, another running client pi, and a third running client pi. It would consider the second and third instances separately regarding module caches. Yes, each Python interpreter instance has its own independent sysmodules cache. So if you have server one or server, client, and client, each one of these processes would have its own separate Python interpreter with its own module cache. This means modules imported in server pi won't affect the client pi processes. Each client pi process would perform its own imports independently. If a module has some global state like a counter or configuration, each interpreter instance would have its own separate copy. And for things like global variables in modules, each process gets its own copy. Module level configuration needs to be set up. Module level configuration needs to be set up for each process. Gotcha. Singletons implemented at the module level, you get one per process. Memory usage. Imported modules aren't shared between processes. However, if you're using multiprocessing in fork on Unix-like systems, the child processes initially inherit a copy of the parent's module cache. They'll diverge from there as each process continues running. Okay. I understand. So what this means is we can implement what I was proposing, and that would probably work. But yeah, as long as this got imported first, then SS or CS would be properly set. So now I can ask Claude, what is the code to reference the importing module name from the call stack? Or is there a better way to access which file is importing another? Okay, so there are a few ways to determine which module is doing the importing. Here's the main approach: is using name and package in the module being imported. I am name being imported. Using the inspect module to get the caller's info. Yeah, because we need we can't just use name. If we just use name, it's always gonna give us change attribute list here. We need the name of the caller. So import inspect def get caller info. Get the frame 2 levels up. One would be this function. 2 is the importer. 1 would be this function. 2 is the importer. So we have the caller frame equals inspect dot stack at index 1. So that's gonna access the caller frame. So 0 would be this function. Actually, right? Am I wrong here? It's caller frame inspect stack at 0 would be this function. And then 1, the next one would be the next one further back in the stack. And that would be referring to the calling stack. Or the calling frame. Yeah, it's a frame stack, so it's a stack of frames. And the frame that is associated with the function get caller info in this would be like the root frame. So that would be at index 0, I think. And then like the one that's calling it would be the next one in the stack, the next frame in the stack. And then that would give us the caller frame, and then we would get the module name by doing inspect dot get module, passing in the caller frame at index 0. So it's there's a list of information. I think the frame returns I'd have to look at it specifically to refresh my memory on this, because I'm not super familiar with the return values of the inspect. I'm not really familiar with that. It's a dictionary or a list or whatever. Then we have return file name as caller name. Module is module underscore underscore name. So we just need the file name. We don't actually need the module. We just need the caller frame.file name. So then all we would need to do would be to do inspect.stack at index 0 or index 1, and then caller frame would be inspect stack at index 1, and then we would do dot file name after that. I believe so. So let me test this real quick. Let's see, import inspect, isn't that what it is? And then we do just copy this code. So the caller frame is going to be inspect.stack. Let's print out first. We don't need the module, we just need the file name. So let's first print inspect.stack and see what that shows. Let's run this. So we get frame info. So this is what inspect stack returns. We got frame info. Frame equals frame at this memory space, and it's got all this frame info in it. And it's showing test reminders 5496. Okay, because that's where we run it from. And then it's the next one is frame, and then okay, so this is file name. This is frame equals frame at such and such. Then it's got file name. Then it gives you the line number. Then it gives you the function, which is just module in this case, and then code context. Then we get the index, positions, all kinds of technical shit. Alright, so then if you do, so inspect stack at 0, well, we actually need to put this inside of a function. So we'll put def func, and then we will call function, okay? And then we'll run it again. This should clarify. Wait, valid syntax, inspect stack. Oops. Let's just do that again without any index reference. So now we have frame info, frame at such and such memory space. Then we have the file, and then the line. And it says file name, test reminders, line number 5497. Function is inside of func. Code, context, print, inspect, stack, and index positions. And then we have one. So that function was func, but this function is module. So that's the difference here. So yeah, the at index 0 would return this first frame, and then the at index 1 would return the second frame, which contains all this information from the calling frame, which would be the outer module. So like this would be the stack. Well, this is a little bit confusing. So wherever the function is called from is the base stack. Am I right? So no, that's not right. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the initial stack in the initial frame in the stack is going to be the frame from which the function was called. So in this case, the initial frame at index 0, is going to be func. So it's going to be, this is its own frame, and the index 1 is going to be the outer frame which called function. So that's why on the at index 1 frame we get the function being module. So what we could do is we could, yeah, just go off of the file name here, and so that would be to get the file name of the let's do this a little bit we're gonna do this a little bit more proper. So this is the last thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go take lunch. This is like, it's kind of complicated stuff. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create another file, another test file, and it's just gonna be we're gonna call it cal test, and then we're going to, inside of, we don't even need to do anything here. We can just put print test reminders 5, and then we'll create a new file here, and we'll call it cal test. Alright, and in cal test we're gonna put ss or cs is equal to do it like this. Import inspect, and then we'll say if inspect, or rather first we'll just basically move this code. We don't need inspect imported here anymore, I don't think. Let me copy this. Did I already have it copied? I don't know. Copy it again just in case. Go back over here, and now we paste this function into caltestpy. So in caltestpy we import inspect, we create a function which prints the inspect stack. Actually, I don't think I want it from a function call. We just want it like this. And now we're gonna run from test reminders and see what output we get. Okay, so we ran from test reminders and we imported caltest. So this is mimicking what we're doing in the actual project. And this gives us frame info. So the initial frame here, which this actually gets printed from caltest. So caltest is the file from which the inspect stack starts from. That's index 0 because that's where we're calling the method from. And then the next one in line is going to be the, let's see, file name frozen import lib bootstrap 488 code call with frames removed, file name frozen import lib bootstrap. Okay, so this is like an intermediary. And then we get at index 2 import lib bootstrap external, and then at index, what is this going to be, 0, 1, 2, this is going to be index 3, we have frozen import lib bootstrap. Why does it keep going through this bootstrap thing? I'm confused. Okay, so it's still bootstrap. Test reminders. Okay, so then eventually we get as the last one, which would be index -1, we get where it was called from, which is the test reminders file. So really we need to do -1, right? Isn't that, if it's not inside of a function. Now if we were to put this inside of a function, now this is really complicated, but that's not what we're dealing with. I just wanted to see how this would work. And then if we do caltest.func, how does it work then? So then we get caltest is still the root, just like it was before. And then we get the next one is test reminders. So it's meant to be used for functions. If you don't have it called from a function, you get all these bootstrap, external bootstrap frames that get inserted in between the two calling spaces, which is strange. I don't know why that is the case, but anyway, so yeah, then you so it's meant for functions, but you can do it without a function, basically, as long as you access -1 index, right? That would always give you the module that is being run. the main module. Yeah, so if we're using a function, then index 1 would work. But if we're not using a function, then we would just use, let's see, using sys getFrame less recommended as implementation specific. So we don't want to use getFrame because getFrame is actually implementation specific. We want to do inspect stack. The inspect module approach is generally considered the most robust. Okay, it's the same thing we did. These methods show where the import statement is being executed, not necessarily the top level script. In some cases, like interactive shells, the module name might be main. The inspect module is the most maintainable approach. Okay. But if we ran the inspect stack from an imported module, the importing module would always or main module would be the importing module, or the main module would be the frame at index -1. Not quite. The call stack in Python goes forward from main or the entry point. So the earliest outermost frames, including the main module, are at the start of the stack. Okay, right. Gotcha. The call stack in Python goes forward from main or the entry point. So the earliest outermost frames, including the main module, are at the start of the stack, the lower indices, while the most recent calls are at the end. Okay, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna go eat lunch, and I'll come back, and hopefully we'll understand this a little better.